everyone, welcome back to the channel. There was a pro Sophie Cunningham rally held outside the Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle, as there was a match between Seattle Storm and Indiana Fever, where Sophie Cunningham and Caitlin Clark were playing. And these young ladies, these women, they gathered together, and this was all about supporting Sophie Cunningham after she spoke out in defense of female athletes, saying that she believes that women should be allowed to compete against women and have their own category and not be forced to compete against men and boys in their categories. So simple. It wasn't an anti-trans rally. It was to cheer on Sophie Cunningham, to let her know that we heard what you said and we appreciate it and we want to thank you. There were fans who were from Seattle, who were typically Seattle Storm fans, cheering on Sophie. So there was support, for both teams really, but it was all about Sophie Cunningham because we want to encourage female athletes, especially the ones who are currently competing here in the US, to speak out. We had Irina Sabalenka speak out when she was about to do the Battle of the Sexes, and people commended her for that. But in America, there aren't any female athletes who are currently competing who are speaking out in defense of the women's category. So Sophie Cunningham is essentially the first. So in order, to keep this going, to encourage female athletes to not fear, being labeled and all sorts, we want to offer our support and encourage them to continue to speak out like Sophie has. Brandy Cruz was there. She is a podcaster. A lot of her focus is on Washington State. And, there's a huge bill that is pending for November that people are going to vote on. It's a bill to save women's sports, essentially.
Right. So one of the things that we are out here talking about a little bit is Let's Go Washington. It has a bill now, a ballot up, and it is IS 638. Okay, yeah.
I-638.
You want to say what it is?
This is going to restrict girls' sports in Washington State to females. It's going to bring the state of Washington in line with Title IX, which says that females have their own access to sports and equal opportunities for sports based on their sex, not their gender identity. So vote yes on this initiative. It's already qualified. It will be on your ballot in November.
And it was made clear from the organizers of the event, of the basketball game, that there was to be no political T-shirts or signs, especially, saying vote yes or vote no. That's obviously political. So I believe the event was organized by Amy Souza and Brandy Cruz. She stressed that the rules were laid out for everybody who attended the rally and said that everybody should respect the rules. All the girls and women who showed up should respect the rules and have no political T-shirts or signs or anything like that. And that's what they did. They were very respectful. They were not hateful, and they didn't target anybody. And it wasn't even considered an anti-trans rally. It was considered a pro-Sophie Cunningham rally. And you would see girls wearing XXXY T-shirts, but that was it. And of course, anybody with common sense should agree that that isn't even political, saying that girls deserve their own category. That's why it is an 80% issue, an 80-20 issue. Even people on the left who are reasonable would admit that that is a reasonable request to protect women's and girls' sports. But not everybody followed the rules. Brandy reported that people who were against, legislation to protect women's sports, they had their signs. They were essentially handed out signs as well.
So you can imagine my surprise when we get in there and we see dozens of no hate in Washington State signs that say vote yes or vote no on initiative 001 and 638, the initiative to protect girls' sports and the initiative to restore parental rights. I'm like, I just told everybody to leave their yes on these signs outside because it says very clearly in the rules, no political signs. And security at the door was checking people's signs to make sure that they were acceptable. And so I thought, these were everywhere. And frequently they were putting them on the Jumbotron over and over and over again. No hate in Washington State. Vote no, vote no. And I thought, why isn't anybody taking their signs away?
And they had them in the stadium and they were put on the Jumbotron. Amy with her XXXY t-shirt was put on the Jumbotron as well, which was great. But there were a lot of people, you know, who were political, mainly saying vote no, who were put on the Jumbotron.
Above us, where it's like technically part of the entry to the stadium, where we were told we could not go, the no hate in Washington State, the pro boys and girls sports people were allowed to stand for an hour.
There seem to be different rules depending on what side of the debate you fell on. So we had girls who themselves had to deal with competing against male athletes, and 2 girls in particular were gifted front row seats from a donor. And these seats go for over $1,000. That is a huge opportunity for these girls. They must have been very excited. Well, these young girls, by the end of the first half, at least one of them ended up in tears. She said an older woman came up to them and started berating them. What the F are you doing? Basically questioning their sign. You know, how can you be behaving this way? I hope God forgives you.
We're being super respectful. We're just holding our signs and cheering for both teams. And this older lady comes up to us, and at first I think she's going to be nice, and then she asks, like, what are you guys doing? Or something like that. And then it was like, Jesus loves everyone. That's what she told us. And I was like, oh, I know. Like, I'm religious. Like, I know. Like, I know.
Nice.
Yeah. And she's like, oh, I hope Jesus can forgive you for what sin you've done. And, like, something like that. And then she told us that we were effing insane. And that we
And she's like, and she went like this.
insane.
Yeah.
She's like, you better stop this.
And stop pulling
shit.
this. Yeah.
And
For you guys
I
to
hope
come
God
here
can
and
save
pull
you.
this. Yeah.
She said, for you to come here and pull this shit.
Yeah.
She said the word.
Yeah.
Did she say effing insane or fucking
No,
insane?
she said the word. Yeah.
And nobody around you spoke up for you.
No.
No.
I will say, Annalie, when I came over, you were in tears.
Yeah, I've never been yelled at like that. I mean, I've had people hate on me on the internet, but like it doesn't really affect me as much because it's just people online. But that just took me by surprise because I thought she was gonna be nice, and then she starts like screaming at us and cussing at us. So yeah.
And so you said she walked away, and we thought that was kind of it. But she mentioned something to you about like working for the team, or
There was another lady that like told us like we were able to have our opinions, but we needed to not be political about it. And I tried to explain to her I wasn't trying to be political. I was just trying to support Sophie and support the other teams.
And you were
too.
just sitting there watching.
Yeah, we hadn't
You were cheering
interacted
for
with
both
anyone
sides.
except for like saying excuse me.
Yeah.
Like we were really nice and stuff. And then this lady told us like, oh, you know who that is? And we were like, no.
So what was your reaction when I texted you that is the owner of the team?
It's just sad. We were like, what? Yeah, we were shocked.
Yeah.
It's disappointing though too, because she's also a woman and she just kind of cussed out 2 16-year-olds that were just trying to have fun. We weren't trying to be political. You're just trying to support Sophie, which I guess maybe that. Oh well.
Yeah. And so overall, because I know that wasn't the only person who was like giving you a hard time, kind of.
There was more.
I mean, did you feel like they've got their no hate signs up, and did you feel welcome?
No, the whole time we were kind of on edge. I was
we were
like,
like,
should we pull our sign out? I don't know.
Yeah.
And the lady was sitting right across from us, and the 2 people on the side of us were like turning their back and trying to sit as far away from us.
Yeah.
And, yeah, they did not. Yeah.
Because one of them, when you sat down, did you notice that they had a
I
no
didn't-
hate in these United States?
I didn't notice it till after she had said something like, Sophie's not actually speaking up for girls, which who else would she is?
Brandy Cruz saw what was going on. She asked, the girls what happened. They told her. So she went and got security. And she said the security were very helpful. They were very, appalled by what they had heard. So the second half began. They're sitting down. And then they see the woman sitting opposite them, sat right next to Sue Bird. And they're like, that's the woman. Well, it turns out that this woman was a co-owner of Seattle Storm. The co-owner of the team treated 16-year-old girls appallingly, bullied 16-year-old girls because she was offended by their sign that was in support of Sophie Cunningham, that they were in support of girls' sports, women's sports, and not allowing men and boys to compete in female categories. She couldn't handle it. And while accusing them of being hateful, she proceeds to be the hateful one. So there were no consequences for this woman. because, I guess because she's the co-owner, Brandy argued that she should be treated like any other belligerent fan. Usually they will get asked to leave, they'd probably be banned from a couple of games, and, this woman, she faced no consequences.
But they say, oh, that's the co-owner of the team. And I say, okay, and? I'm thinking, why does it matter? You can't I don't care if you're the co-owner, Sue Bird, or who it is. It's against the fan rules of conduct. So I'm like, can't we do something about this right now? I mean, security had basically said, if you find this woman, let us know. Well, I found her. Sorry that she happens to be the co-owner of the team, but she cursed out 2 16-year-olds. I'm like, can we do something about it? And then one of the security guards says, well, you could go, there's an office up here. You could go up and talk to him. And the male security guard says, the best course of action is probably just to write a letter to the team.
There were also some other disgusting incidents that occurred from the side that called themselves, the tolerant ones, the side that's all about love and acceptance and inclusion. Well, there were a couple of women, grown women, who decided to trip some people who were wearing t-shirts I guess they didn't like, or had signs they didn't like. They were tripping people as they were walking through the stands, which is very dangerous, which is threatening behavior. What if they had tripped and hurt themselves?
Here's 2 girls who decided it would be a good idea to try to trip one of the teen athletes who we were there with. Callie Keeler, who you guys know, who is the girl who had to wrestle a boy unbeknownst to her. Callie Keeler had gotten up to go check on Annalie while she was crying, and these 2 absolute detestable creatures attempted to trip her and then laughed about it. Well, there are their faces. Let's find out who they are. Maybe they're someone of importance too. It is always the people who preach love and inclusion, who think they are morally superior, who are the most detestable, hateful bigots on the planet. If I have learned anything in the last 5 years, I have learned that.
Brandy even mentioned spitting. Spitting. Just because you don't like somebody's t-shirt.
But Sophie Cunningham gets introduced and the crowd just boos her. Caitlin Clark, boo. I mean, above and beyond how you would boo like an opposing team, sort of in a playful way, right? And then after the game, when the Storm lost their 7th game in a row to the Indiana Fever, one fan, a Caitlin Clark fan, was spit on by a Storm fan. Here's the woman.
There she is. She's going to be famous on TikTok.
Simply because these are women and girls coming together and supporting Sophie Cunningham. But these were people who were acting out in violence, threatening behaviour, dangerous behaviour. It's quite dangerous to trip somebody up when they're walking, up some steps. Pretty dangerous if you're asking me. And can you imagine if the pro-female sports people were behaving this way? These radical leftists would be claiming victimhood for years to come if someone so much as looked at them the wrong way. But they're allowed to put their political signs up. They're allowed to act out aggressively. They're allowed to display, threatening behavior, putting their hands on people even, spitting. There's no room for hate. But of course, that doesn't apply to people who agree with them. People who agree with them are allowed to be as hateful as they want, and they will still turn around and play the victim. And if someone so much as defends themselves, well, they will use that against them and have them arrested for defending themselves. So Brandy Cruz, she went online and she was telling everybody what happened, and she was reporting on some of the vile behavior by fans who, I guess, opposed women having their own category. And guess who spoke up in defense of the girls? J.K. Rowling. She said these young women are heroines. They're peacefully protesting against the grotesque unfairness of men playing in women's sport. The only people who are effing insane here are those making a mockery of fair sport for women and trying to bully girls like this into silence. So J.K. Rowling spoke out in defense of these young women. Absolutely brilliant. I'm sure they were very excited about that. And then Seattle Storm decides to issue an apology. The Seattle Storm's ownership group issued an apology Wednesday after minority owner Celeste Keaton reportedly confronted two teenage fans who supported outspoken WNBA star Sophie Cunningham during an emotionally charged loss to the Indiana Fever on Tuesday night at Climate Pledge Arena. And apparently this was their 7th loss in a row. According to the podcaster Brandy Cruz, Keaton launched an expletive-laden rant at the fans who carried a sign that read, "Thank you, Sophie, for speaking up for girls." So the statement said, "We are aware one of our co-owners made comments to two fans in attendance at last night's game. We apologize that this happened. Everyone who attends a Storm game deserves to feel welcome, and we remain committed to creating an inclusive environment where every fan is treated with respect." And this was released by the majority owner, Guinea Glider. I mean, this is a team that posts images like this on their page. Trans rights are human rights. They're sponsored by Alaska Airlines. This is the sort of thing they're focusing on rather than basketball, I guess. So clearly this is one of the wokest teams in the WNBA. And for such a woke league, you know, you do have to outdo yourself to be one of the wokest teams. And yeah, they've issued an apology because this is the co-owner of the team behaving in such a way. An older woman embarrassing herself by behaving so inappropriately towards 16-year-old girls. Because you couldn't keep your emotions in check. You couldn't exercise self-control and continue to be professional because you were triggered by some sign in support of Sophie Cunningham, because you don't like what Sophie had to say about women's sports and why it's important that girls have their own category and are protected in sports. Couldn't handle that. The very thing she accused those girls of doing was what she was doing. She was the one being effing insane with her behaviour. She's the one who needs to ask for forgiveness. So J.K. Rowling spoke out in defence of these girls. But then we had Sophie Cunningham herself speak out in defence of these girls, which I'm sure they greatly appreciated, that they were so excited to see Sophie once again speaking out in a way, you know, that unfortunately receives backlash. But she decided, no, I'm going to support these girls and I appreciate what they did. Showing these girls that what they did was not in vain. She saw them and she was happy that they came to support her. Straight from her X account, she said, "I truly believe there is a safe space and love for everybody. Biological girls, biological boys, trans women and trans men. Everyone is welcome at my table. You can disagree and still be kind. Bravo to those girls for standing up for what they believe. You'll be hearing from me soon. Yay for gifts." And then she said, "Truly embarrassing of the co-owner. Unfortunately, shows the type of leader she is." Wow. So that takes a lot for her to speak out like this, especially calling out the co-owner directly. And good for her. And unfortunately, she does receive backlash. We have seen the messages online directed towards Sophie for saying something so simple. And this is why none of the other female athletes who are currently competing speak out like this. But Sophie continues to show courage. She continues to stand on what she knows to be right. And she continues to be authentic. And this is what these girls need. They need a role model like Sophie, standing up for them, showing courage, and not being afraid to speak the truth. So people are saying, thank you, Sophie. Thank you for speaking up. And of course, there are people who are going to want to correct Sophie with some of the terminology that she uses. At this time, I would just like to apply grace, but I understand. You're close, but not quite there, Sophie. There were men, there were women, and there are no imaginary people. It's important to tell the truth, the whole truth. Otherwise, children will be confused about reality, and then we cannot solve any problems in the world of lies. And, you know, I do want to think back to many of us when we started speaking out about this topic. I was still using certain terminology. And even now, I'm sure my terminology isn't always perfect. So many of us have come a long way. I remember Tish Hyman, she caught some flack because she was referring to them as transsexuals, I think. She was saying, oh, we should call them transsexuals or something like that. She caught some flack and then she was like, no, you know what, you're right. She learned from the experience and now just calls them men. So there are times where we get caught up in using certain terminology. People will call you MAGA for having common sense. Continue to be bold. I don't agree with this at all. You can't be everyone's friend. We all have a significant impact on each other. There's no way accepting every type of behavior and lifestyle creates anything but social destruction. Stick to your principles. I don't disagree with Dr. Dina there, that's for sure. But Sophie is a lone voice at the moment and she is in the WNBA. So I think we have to have understanding. I think it's going to take a little bit of time for her to understand, the importance of language when it comes to this situation. I cannot stress enough how important it is to use the correct language, to use plain and simple words, men, women, because they have conditioned people, groomed people to believe that if somebody has a label, then nobody's allowed to exercise their natural instincts for their survival, for their protection. Nobody's allowed to be in fear of certain people. The man in the locker room, in the women's locker room, you're not allowed to be in fear of that man because he has a label. So yes, language is very important. The changing of our language, where we use certain terminology that isn't accurate, has played a part in grooming a whole nation, multiple nations, in some cases for decades. And in order to convince people of such an extreme stance that it's okay for a man to be in the women's locker room, in the women's showers, in front of women and girls, in order to convince people of that, you're going to have to convince people that everything changes when that man has a label. And that's exactly what has happened. So I'm glad that this co-owner, Celeste, has been called out. Quite frankly, she should be embarrassed. And, Seattle Storm did issue an apology. At least that's an acknowledgement that what happened was wrong. Because a lot of the time, I've seen these organizations double down and claim that they're against hate while supporting hateful people, quite frankly, just because they're on the side of what you agree with politically. That's not right. Because it sounds like there were a few incidents of women and girls being targeted when they were simply there to watch a basketball match and to support Sophie Cunningham. So I hope, Sophie continues to become more knowledgeable about this issue, continues to look into it, and to speak to these girls. They need someone like Sophie hearing their story and listening to them. And I guarantee you, the more she speaks to these girls, these young girls who have been affected by all of this, the more she's going to speak out and certainly not be afraid to use plain and simple language when it comes to this matter. It may take a little bit of time though, and I'm so glad that she has already began having the courage to speak out in the first place. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like, comment and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video. And a huge thanks to all of those who have hyped my videos. It is greatly appreciated.